When a device reaches its 8th generation, it can be easy to assume you're getting more of the same. Faster chips, a lighter design, maybe some cosmetic tweaks. But in the case of Microsoft Surface Pro 8, you're getting the biggest redesign the tablet has seen in years. And actually, it's heavier than its predecessor. That's 1.96 pounds, up from 1.7. In exchange for that weight gain, though, you get up to 52% better battery life and Thunderbolt 4 support, plus a larger display with skinnier bezels and a 120Hz refresh rate. That's something rarely seen outside gaming rigs. It looks different too, taking style cues from the ARM-based Surface Pro X. Other upgrades include newer 11th gen Core i5 and i7 processors and a slightly higher res rear camera. On paper, at least, it addresses 2 of our 3 main complaints about the Surface Pro 7, though the detachable keyboard is still sold separately. But before we declare the Pro 8 a slam dunk, it's worth noting that the starting price is now $1,100, up significantly from $749 on the Surface Pro 7. Given that, it's worth considering whether the improvements are worth the price hike, and how the Pro 8 compares to traditional laptops now that it costs just as much. First up, the screen. Microsoft has always offered lovely displays on the Surface devices, and the Surface Pro 8 is no exception. The touchscreen here is 11% larger than before, that's 13 inches up from 12.3, with noticeably slimmer bezels than before. The resolution is 2880 by 1920, nearly 11% sharper than the Pro 7. It's also 12.5% brighter, according to Microsoft. In short, it's bright, colorful, and I never struggled with the viewing angles, regardless of where I was sitting in the house or how much sun was streaming in from outside. On a roof deck, though, the 450-nit screen didn't feel quite bright enough at max settings, which is something to keep in mind if you're planning on using this on the go. Most important, of course, is that 120Hz refresh rate. This is a relatively new addition to the world of notebooks. Even so, it's already something of a meme for reviewers like me to say, "You don't know what you're missing until you experience it." Well, I'm annoyed to say that is 100% true, so here's me repeating a tired cliche. You will likely be happy with the 60Hz mode that's enabled by default, but once you switch to 120Hz in the settings, you're not going to want to revert back. I notice a difference immediately, even with the sort of mundane tasks I do hundreds of times a day, launching apps and minimizing windows. Basically, it all happens faster. It's worth noting, though, you're unlikely to notice much of a difference in movie playback, as Microsoft did some software work specifically to lower the refresh rate for that use case. Meanwhile, the 2 USB-C ports now support Thunderbolt 4. Users have been requesting this for a while, and it means that people can now plug in high-speed drives, multiple 4K displays, and eGPUs. Of course, the built-in kickstand also suggests Microsoft knows people are going to spend more time docking this device than holding it. The kickstand in this year's model is at once gorgeous and kind of annoying. The weighty aluminum helps the Pro 8 feel like the high-end device it is. Even the snap it makes when you pop it into place somehow just sounds premium. On the other hand, even after using the Pro 8 for a few days, I still find the kickstand awkward to pull out. Basically, those narrow divots make it kind of tough to grab onto. Once you do get it open, though, you'll enjoy flexible viewing angles and a sturdy design that makes it comfortable to use the Pro 8 in your lap. I even used it on my outstretched legs while propped up in bed, though I don't necessarily recommend that for extended use. Finishing up our hardware tour, the rear camera now shoots at 10 megapixels, up from 8 MP, and it can record in 4K. The images are just okay, but certainly not worth the embarrassment of shooting photos in public with a 13-inch tablet, nor is it worth the inconvenience of having to hold a 2-pound device steady. Really, folks, just use your smartphone. Call it a day. Personally, I was more impressed by the webcam, which is the same 5-megapixel 1080p sensor used in the Pro 7 Plus and the Pro X. It's just so much more capable in mixed lighting than my MacBook Pro. In fact, I'm using it right now to record this video. But that's just the base hardware. To test the Surface Pro is also to test accessories. And in this case, Windows 11, which became widely available on Monday. This year, the accessories include the $180 Surface Pro Signature keyboard and the new $130 Slim Pen 2, which uses a haptic motor and promises lower latency, a sharper tip, and improved precision. That pen docks inside a charging cradle on the Signature keyboard, which was also designed to be used with the Surface Pro X. Like earlier Surface keyboards, the Signature is covered in Microsoft's soft Alcantara material, which feels kinda like suede, kinda like felt. Take your pick. All told, there are 2 ways to use it. You can allow it to lie flat on your desk with the pen cradle exposed above the function row, or you can fold up the pen dock piece so that it magnetically attaches to the tablet's lower bezel. This lifts the keyboard at a more ergonomic angle. There are pros and cons to each method. I find the ergonomic lift more comfortable, but felt distracted at times by the flimsiness of the panel while I was typing. On the other hand, as insubstantial as the panel feels, the buttons themselves are spacious and springy. The wobble might sometimes annoy me, but I rarely miss when touch typing on this. Meanwhile, the trackpad is decently sized, two-finger scrolling feels smooth. For extended use, I preferred using a Bluetooth mouse, but of course you don't need one, especially when you're on the go. For whatever quibbles I have about the keyboard, including the fact that it's sold separately, I do love the Slim Pen too. The haptic motor is a small but delightful touch, vibrating when you flip over the pen to erase something. I use the pen to write in Windows 11 text entry fields, and Windows mostly recognize my sloppy handwriting. In the Microsoft Store, I had to try twice to get it to decipher the word Evernote. It initially thought I typed everyone, but other than that, it generally understood what I was trying to write. Aside from Evernote, I tried the pen in other apps including OneNote and the recently redesigned Whiteboard, also from Microsoft, which I found particularly enjoyable. What can I say? I'm a sucker for rainbow and glitter pens, apparently. I also sometimes found myself just scrolling with the pen, even though it's just as easy to use my fingers. By the end of my testing period, I felt the same way about the Slim Pen 2 that I did about the Apple Pencil in my last iPad Air review. Which is to say, most people don't need a stylus, but they're more fun to use than you might think, so don't knock it until you try it. Though the benchmarks indicate a laptop whose performance equals or slightly trails other Core i5, i7 machines with integrated Intel Iris Xe graphics, for all intents and purposes, it felt like a fast machine in everyday use. As I said too, all this mundane stuff feels that much zippier when you switch to 120Hz mode. As for battery life, Microsoft claims the Surface Pro 8 can last up to 16 hours on a charge, up from 10.5 on the last generation. Battery performance was one of Engadget's main complaints about the Pro 7. It actually performed worse than the model that preceded it, so I'm happy to report the battery life here is much improved. I logged 13 hours and 6 minutes in our standard test, which is up from 7 hours and 50 minutes on the Pro 7. Now that was with the default 60Hz screen refresh rate, of course. With the more power-heavy 120Hz option enabled, the machine lasted 7 hours and 36 minutes under the same conditions. The Surface Pro 8 starts at $1,100 with a quad-core Core i5 processor, 8 GB of RAM, and 128 GB SSD. From there, you can step up to 256 or 512 GB of storage, 16 GB of RAM, and a Core i7 processor. The most expensive model actually includes a terabyte of storage and 32 GB of RAM for $2,600. But you'll still have to pay extra for the keyboard, of course. There's also an LTE-equipped model, but just know that that variant maxes out at 512 GB of storage and won't be available until some later date. That'll start at $1,100 with a Core i3 processor. To recap, the base $1,100 configuration with the $180 keyboard costs $1,280. And let's be real, you definitely want the keyboard. So that puts it squarely in ultra-portable laptop territory. Perhaps its most obvious competitor is the Dell XPS 13, a longtime Engadget favorite that we described as tweaked to near perfection in our most recent review. It currently starts at $967 on Dell's website with a Core i3 processor. You can get a Core i5 machine with 8 GB of RAM, a touchscreen, and 256 GB of storage for $1,269, which is similar to what the Surface Pro 8 costs with the keyboard. At that point, it depends on your priorities. You get a more optimal typing experience with the XPS 13, but pen support and more flexibility with the Surface Pro 8. Another easy comparison, HP's Spectre 13 X360. It's a convertible laptop with a Core i5 CPU, Iris Xe graphics, 8 GB of RAM, and 256 GB of storage for $900. In our review, we awarded it a high score of 94 and listed barely any cons, one of which happened to be the webcam. Perhaps the better comparison is the iPad Pro, which starts at $799 with 128 GB of storage and a smaller 11-inch screen. There's a 12.9-inch model, and that starts at $1099. Like the Surface Pro, it doesn't come with a keyboard or stylus. Apple's first-party keyboard costs $299, but you can pay less if you choose a third-party brand. All of this is to say that if you opted for the smaller 11-inch model and went with Apple's own keyboard, you'd be paying a similar total price as you would for the Surface Pro 8 and keyboard. The 12.9-inch iPad Pro is more similar in size to the Pro 8, but it's more expensive once you factor in the keyboard. At the end of the day, the Surface Pro is incrementally better with a fast refresh screen, Thunderbolt 4 support, and a return to long battery life. But it's also more expensive than ever with a $350 higher starting price that effectively wipes out any price advantage it once had over premium ultra-portable laptops. The pricier the Surface Pro gets, the more caveats I have to add. The pen experience is lovely, but the most persuasive reason for me to recommend the Surface Pro is 120Hz display. It truly does make a difference in everyday use. Microsoft needs to do a better job communicating the benefits to would-be buyers, though. I understand why it's disabled out of the box, which of course is battery life, But how will average users find it if they're not in the know? And as of this writing, the 120 Hz refresh rate doesn't get a prominent mention on Microsoft's product page. Meanwhile, as good as typing experience and battery life are, they're not necessarily superior to a comparably priced notebook. If you only have money for one high-end laptop-like device then, the bar seems higher for choosing the Surface Pro over an ultra portable. At the end of the day, the decision is yours. That's it for our Microsoft Surface Pro 8 review. If you liked this video, please like and subscribe to Engadget on YouTube to find more videos like this.